All right. I'll hide the notation. Okay. So, yeah, I guess welcome to this week's lecture. Originally, Daniel was supposed to be here, but I guess he had track. So you guys are stuck with me. All right.
Oh, that's sick.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, lucky. Well, anyways, today's lecture will be like regarding this game between Botvinnik and Capablanca, two very famous chess players. Botvinnik is this I think he's this Soviet guy. He's pretty good at like theory and stuff. He personally said his tactics aren't the greatest, but I mean he's still a very capable tactical player, obviously. And then Capablanca, he's said to be one of like the greatest chess players of like the classical period. So that would be like early 20th century, around that time. For some perspective, Capablanca, he died in 1942 at the age of 53. And he was world champion from like 1921 to like 1927. Okay, and this game was in 1938, so past Capablanca's prime, I guess, but he was still very good. And this game sort of illustrates how white would like ideally play the Nimzo. And at the time, the Nimzo, which is an opening, it goes like d4, I have 6. So this is the Nimzo, also known as Nimzo India. At the time, this was a very fresh opening. There wasn't much theory developed. So a lot of the lines and variations you see in this game aren't as relevant today, but what matters is the ideas. Okay, let's start. So Nimzo d4 is, like we said, e3. I think e3 is still the most common move, but these days people will also play queen c2. And the idea is if black ever takes, you can take with the queen, so your pawn structure is still like you don't have these double pawns if you like if you had to take with the pawn, right? And double pawns tend to be a weakness. So by playing queen c2, you try to avoid that. But anyways, e3, because as I said at the time, right, Nimzo wasn't very developed. So e3 was pretty logical. Essentially, you're just, controlling the center with your pawn, opening up this bishop. Yeah, nothing too extraordinary. So e3, d5 makes sense. Black controls the center. So if we go back to the start, right, you can see that Nimzo focuses on controlling e4. So, right, by playing the knight here, you control e4 directly. By playing the bishop here, you pin white's knight, which controls e4. So, I mean, just like a basic question, right? Why would black even want to control e4? Why e4 above other squares?
Is it because it's your opponent's center or like close to your opponent's center?
Well, one reason is, yeah, because it's the center, right? Obviously the center. But you could also say the same thing for like e5 or d5. Why is he going for e4, not e5, for example?
Does he want to put his knight there?
Sometimes black puts the knight there, but it's not the main reason. The main reason has to do with white's first move, actually, which is d4. So as a hint, like if white plays d4, right, what would he also like to play? Like if we go back to the first position, if you're white here and you get to move again, what do you play?
E4.
Yeah, E4, right? So essentially black just stops white from taking total control of the center. Because by playing D4, white takes the center with the D pawn. So you can't really let him take the whole center if you let him play E4. And that tends to be the same thing when white plays E4, black tries to stop white from playing D4. And conversely, white wants to play E4, right? That's his plan. So the E4 square is going to be very important throughout this whole game, as you will see. All right, so E3. Now E3, another idea is like you essentially wait before playing E4, right? White sort of wants to build up his pieces to support the E4 square before he finally plays E4 and tries to get an advantage, because he'll be occupying the whole center if once he plays E4. But for now, you need to play E3 so you can develop your pieces, right? Okay. D5, again, controlling E4, also just putting a pawn in the center. A3. So white forces the black bishop to make a decision, neither go back or take the knight. Usually people take the knight, as we see. C5, okay. Now C5, another move to challenge white's center. So if white takes, well, obviously the pawn's not defended, right? But if white takes, now first of all, immediately you can see that white has triple pawns, right? Which are double pawns, but they're worse. And obviously, white should not expect to hold on to all of these pawns, right? Like for example, black can just play here right away. I mean, you're already forking 2 pawns. And even if black doesn't take them back immediately, so like, I don't know, well, he is going to take them back immediately, but the idea is he doesn't even have to take the pawn right now. He can develop his pieces. There's no reasonable way for white to save this pawn and this pawn simultaneously, especially this pawn, which is deep in black's territory with no other pawns to support it. So essentially C5, it's not really a sacrifice because, I mean, black's just going to get his pawn back. And more importantly, if you take on C5, right, you're just basically surrendering your D pawn. And now your center doesn't look as strong as it used to. So C5. So the best thing for white to do is just ignore. And black does not wish to take on D4 because let's say white plays knight F3 or something. You take on D4, right? White can take with this C pawn. So now he doesn't have the double pawns anymore, right? Essentially, if you think about it, right? This pawn came from B2. So if black takes here, you let white turn his B2 pawn into a D4 pawn. So that's not really good for black. Okay. So anyways, white plays E takes D5. The idea is you get rid of your double pawns, first of all, and second of all, you trade off one of black's center pawns for your side pawn. Okay, E takes. And the single drawback from doing that is you let black's bishop out, but as we'll see, that's not really relevant because you just play bishop D3. So like, if you don't play bishop D3, what is black going to play?
Bishop F5.
Bishop F5, yeah. And if black plays bishop F5, this is a pretty good spot for the bishop. You got this whole diagonal here, right? But luckily, white has bishop D3. So that's not a concern when you take on D5. Okay, 5 castles, normal, knight E2. Now, the reason to play knight E2 over knight F3, we'll see later. But does anyone have any ideas on why you would play knight E2 over knight F3?
Is it because it attacks the pawn? Or no, it doesn't attack the pawn, but does it defends your pawn?
Defends which pawn?
Your D pawn?
Your D pawn? Your D pawn is already very well defended. Also, knight f3 would also defend it. So that's not one of the reasons.
Is it to maneuver your knight to somewhere?
Not in particular. You should keep in mind what we said, right? What is the key idea for white here? What is his ultimate plan? To play what move?
E4, right?
E4, yes. So how does knight E2 have to do with playing E4? Think about that. Why does knight E2 make E4 playing easier than knight F3?
Does it not block the F pawn?
Yeah, exactly. If you play knight F3, you can't play F3. If you play knight E2, then you have the idea of F3, E4. And F3, E4 is much better than just playing E4. Because if black takes your pawn when you play F3, E4, you take back with the pawn. So then you still have your center, right? If you take back with a piece, well, I mean, you played E4, which is still pretty good, but you don't have the dominance of the center that you want. So knight E2 over F3, knight F3, and this is pretty common in the NIMSO. Knight E2 is pretty popular because of this idea, and this is also true in like other D4 systems, like the Queen's Gambit. White has knight E2, F3 ideas. Okay. So knight E2, B6. Right? Black sees that his bishop is not going to find a good spot on this diagonal, right? Because if you go here, well, like as we just said, white wants to play F3. So, and he gets to do it for free if you play your bishop here. If you go here, well, there's no point really. First of all, I mean, your bishop is just defending a pawn that does not need to be defended. Second of all, you're blocking the E file. So, and why is blocking the E file bad? Especially in this position.
You can't move your rook into that pawn.
Yeah, because E4 squares most important square on the board, right? And if you're blocking the E file, that's just dumb. Okay. And D7 isn't very good because what are you doing on D7? And that leaves going this way is the best option. So black can, by playing B6, we either go bishop B7 to control E4, or he'll go bishop A6, exchange white's bishop. So white has one less attacker on E4. So castles, bishop A6, as we said. So white trades. White also has the option to not take, I believe, but I don't think it really matters. Because if you don't take, black will take you. So let's say white plays like rook E1. So takes. I guess black gets to play his knight to C6. Whereas if you take, you're forcing his knight to A6. So I guess the idea is the knight is worse here than if you let it go here. Okay. Bishop B2. Yeah, so white's bishop, right? We can see not many good places to go. I mean, by playing E3, you block this diagonal. Your bishop can't come out this way. Bishop D2 versus bishop B2. So you play bishop D2. Well, straight away, right? one of them controls the center and the other one doesn't. If you play bishop b2, you're effectively controlling d4, which may not look important right now, right? Because the pawn is already defended enough. But in the future, if you ever move the c pawn, right, you can move up, you can open this diagonal for the bishop, which could be useful. And not to mention, like, bishop d2 just blocks the d file, so your queen can't go here or anything. Also just occupies this square. Is someone saying something in the chat? Can't read it.
No, Joey just had to go.
Oh, all right. All right, see you, Joey. Right, so bishop b2 over bishop d2, because this one is going to have more uses in the future. Okay, queen d7. So, I mean, this is pretty natural, I would say. Black is just developing his queen. And, well, if you think about it, right? Okay, why do you think, are there any reasons that queen d7 might be a better move than like queen e7 or queen d6, queen c7? What could be a reason?
Is it that you just get the two diagonals as opposed to like one or none?
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. So queen d7 allows your queen a lot more places to go, right? Especially like on the queen side, and you could also go to the king side potentially. So this is a lot more versatile. Whereas if you go like queen here, I mean, there's not many places you can go next. Same thing with queen e7, queen c7. Okay, so queen d7, a4. Now a4, well, let's think, why would white play a4? a4.
I mean, black's queen. Or
Black's queen from
black's queen.
Yeah,
right?
From which square?
Well, b5.
Yeah, b5.
I guess a4.
Yeah, b5 as well as a4. So now obviously black can't go queen b5. And also you can't go queen a4 if you move your queen. So for example, if you want to move your queen here, well, black has this option if you don't play a4. And then his queen can come in, maybe cause problems. So white just plays a4 to avoid all that. Oops. Bishop e2, e7, 4. Okay. So black plays rook e8. Again, targeting this square in particular, e4. Queen d3. White simultaneously attacks the knight, develops his queen, and controls e4. So this is a pretty good move. c4. Okay, c4. Now c4, this move is quite important. And the reason is, all this time, right? Would you say that this pawn center or pawn structure in the center, would you say it's fixed, or it could like change dynamic?
On white, sir.
Sorry, what did you say?
Which one?
Would you say this pawn structure in the center, right? Would you say this is fixed or dynamic? Oh, yeah. So can you change, especially for black, can black change the pawn structure? And by pawn structure, I just mean like essentially the way the pawns are laid out.
I mean, by moving, right? I'm not quite sure.
Okay, well, the answer would be yes, because black has the choice to either take, he can play here as well, right? So he has options with his pawn center here, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like he's not committed to a certain pawn structure. If he takes here, that's a different pawn structure than from him going here. So he can choose which one he prefers. But okay, once black plays c4, now this pawn structure is fixed, right? You can't change this pawn structure anymore as black. So once you play c4, this is the pawn structure. And the only way you could really change this is if you somehow like got your b pawn going up here to here. And that's a lot of effort. So by playing c4, black has fixed the pawn structure. And now the question is this in his favor or not?
Well, it kind of blocks off white's dark square bishop, right?
Okay, that's true. It doesn't block off the b2 bishop, right? So now c4 will probably never happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, white does have this square, so that's like one drawback. You open up this diagonal. But yeah, he'll never really open up this diagonal for his bishop. That's one thing. So that's a good thing. What else? Now, which square could be considered an outpost now? So like,
For the knight,
yeah, for
What?
whatever.
like black's knight can go to e4. I mean, actually, it doesn't change it. It does, but, I mean, it doesn't affect it that.
Yeah. I mean,
But I mean,
e4 wouldn't even be an outpost also, as well, because f3.
True.
But c4 controls which square. That could be useful to black.
Mm-hmm. D3.
d3, okay, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that's far off.
d3, but it's hard to get to d3.
Yeah.
Right, how do you put a knight to d3? You need to go through here, 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 or here.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with those. But no, it's mainly the other square.
It's in it's just,
b3.
I mean, it's got the same thing. You kind of have to, it's hard to get there.
Well, can you envision a path to get there?
I mean, it's blocked by,
How do you get a knight to d3? Which square are available?
well, either right c5, a5,
d5, a5.
4, d2, but no, like those
All right. Well, obviously you're not going
yeah.
these two. But look at a5, right? You can go to a5. How do you go to a5?
So some maneuvering.
Okay, what maneuver?
Oh, okay, it's not that much. Then you put move the knight back to B8, then C6. Yeah.
E3. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's sort of the idea. That's what Capablanca thinks. All right. I'll place B4. White will move his queen, right? And then I will move my knight all the way to B3, where it's very strong. And then I will try to play on the queen side, right? And he understands that white is trying to play E4, but he doesn't think it will be that important, right? He thinks white will play E4 so well, essentially. Okay. And we know now that E4 is actually very good for white. But at the time, right, again, Nimzo, they didn't know a lot about the Nimzo yet. There wasn't a lot of theory. So at the time, Capablanca just thought, all right, suppose white plays E4. I mean, so what, right? What is he going to get? So instead, he decides to spend his time to move the knight to B3 because he thinks that will give him the advantage more than E4 gives the advantage to white. Okay, so that's his plan. And of course, we know Botvinnik's plan, right? What is Botvinnik's plan?
Oh, he's white, right?
Yeah, white.
Well, he said it right.
What'd you say?
Well, get to E4. That's what he said.
Botvinnik's plan is just to play E4. So those are the two plans. So now we understand what each side is trying to do here. So C4, knight B8, rook E1. Now the reason he plays this rook and not the F rook is because, right, he plans to play F3, E4, and after it takes on E4 and you take back, right, the F file will be open. So you want to keep the rook here. And the rook is not needed on the queen side. Essentially, Botvinnik is ditching the queen side to try to open the center. And as we'll see, he will actually go for black's king. So knight B8, rook here, knight C6, knight G3. So he opens up the rook and controls E4 with the knight. Notice he has to do this before playing F3 because if you play F3 now, rook takes E3. So knight G3, knight A5, F3, knight B3, E4. Okay. So now we will see really how effective E4 is compared to knight B3. And notice that this pawn is hanging, right? But Botvinnik doesn't care because he judges that E4 will be much more powerful than this pawn, right? It's worth losing this pawn to play E4 in his opinion. So that's why he shifts the rook over here because he decides, well, this rook would be better off supporting E4 instead of protecting this worthless pawn. Okay, so black takes. And notice, after taking this pawn, right, this queen is sort of misplaced. So on A4, the queen has to spend more time if it wants to go back and defend, as we'll see. On D7, at least it has some control of like this side of the board, right? But on A4, it's just isolated. So now Botvinnik plays E5. So the question here is E5 or take on D5. If you take on D5, so let's say takes on D5. Black takes back. All right. So now it's hard to say whether white really got anything out of this. Because, well, first of all, black has these two really strong knights here. And second of all, this rook looks dumb now, right? Now you're looking really dumb for moving this rook instead of this one. So if you take on D5, that's what happens. And then black would probably win. But if you play E5 here, the idea is you play E5 and then try to continue the attack. You can either advance this pawn or use this pawn as like a battering ram. Try to go to E6 and open up black's king. So E5 over E takes D5 here. E5, knight D7, queen F2. Queen f2, the idea is, I think, get on the f file so you can play here, and this way the queen will already be aimed at the king. And this is important when you're like carrying out your plans and stuff, right? When you make moves in general, we know that pawns cannot move backwards, right? So you should try to maneuver your pieces before you make any like commitments with your pawns. So you could play f4, you could play f4, but f4 is a commitment, right? You don't know for sure if you want to play f4. I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? But if you play queen f2, I mean, you know you're going to play queen f2 at some point. So you might as well, right? And if your queen needs to be somewhere else, you know, say queen f2, and then black threatens something, which he doesn't here, but suppose he did, right? Your queen can always go back. But if you move your pawn, and then suddenly it turns out that, like, I don't know, playing this pawn here was bad for whatever reason, you can't go back to f3. So you always need to take lots of care when you're moving your pawns and committing them. So, and like as we saw previously, right, when Capablanca played c4, that was a pretty large commitment, right? Now, after e4, he could not open the center and try to get some stuff on the c file or anything like that. His whole plan was already centered. His whole plan was already set out after he played c4, and that was to play knight b3. And as we'll see, knight b3 turns out not to be so good. So, all right. So queen f2, g6. He tries. Black is stopping knight f. Oops. Knight f5. He's preventing knight f5, knight d6, or anything like that. As well as knight h5, if that's ever a problem. But of course, g5 also weakens the dark squares, right? So that's a trade-off. You got black has to consider. So f4, right? And another problem with g6 is that if white plays f5, you'll be able to trade your pawn off and open the f file. Whereas if your pawn's on g7, it's a little bit hard. So f5, okay. So black decides he has to play f5 to save his position, because otherwise, I mean, let's just say he plays a random move, rook b. The f5 is coming. So now f5, and you're threatening takes, queen f7, and that's obviously not good for black, right? But how do you stop it? You take, well, I mean, you're just opening up your king here. So knight f5, threatening queen here, lots of check regrets, as well as knight h6 or knight d6, and then taking on f7. So, I mean, in this position, this is clearly very bad. Not to mention that white can play e6 and like further destroy your kingside defense. So it's not very bad if you just ignore f5. So therefore, Capablanca decides he has to play f5 himself. And here, en passant, takes. All right, f5 anyway, right? So f5, now we see that he is going to open the f file inevitably. So next move will be takes if black doesn't take. Obviously, g5 is questionable because, well, first of all, this was a pass pawn now, right? And second of all, g5 doesn't look very strong. Like, this pawn could be a weakness. And, well, most importantly, it's just that, like, this pawn is free to advance as soon as you dislodge this knight. So, all right, trades first. All right, so first he trades the rooks, which makes sense, right? You trade the rooks, there's less stuff to attack you with. It takes. He tries to trade all the rooks. And Botvinnik decides he's fine with trading the rooks, but only on his terms. So rook e6. So takes. And now this is a pretty strong pawn. And the f file is open for the queen. So king g7. I mean, there's no other way to defend the knight, right? You move the knight somewhere, I don't know, here. Queen f7, followed by checkmate. So, and notice again, right? This queen, if this queen were back here, it could help defend, but because the queen went to take this pawn, there's not a lot this queen can really do now. It's just stuck here. And now, essentially, what we're seeing on the king side here is we have white's queen and pawn versus the king and knight, right? So even though material is actually in black's favor here, what matters is on the king side. And on the king side, white has the advantage. So king g7, forced, queen f4. And queen f4 is actually setting up a tactic. We'll see in a sec. As well as threatening to go here and invade. So black decides he needs to withdraw his queen and help defend. So queen e5. So here, right, even though white is down a pawn, he's not really in a hurry. He knows that his position is better, and black is not going to be able to convert his pawn anytime soon, right? Like, if black wants to convert his pawn advantage, he has to trade off the queens, which obviously white is not going to allow, or he has to like somehow push this pawn off the board, and that's going to take many moves. And in that time, white could definitely checkmate. So queen e5. There is this saying in chess. It goes, when in doubt, centralize. So, you know, if you don't know what to do, just centralize your pieces, because obviously by centralizing your pieces, you improve them. And queen e5 is very good here because, first of all, you support this pawn. You also pin this knight, right? So queen e5 makes sense. Queen e7. All right, and this is a tactic. So bishop a3. All right, so now let's just take a second here. What happens if queen takes a3? And by the way, that is what black played. And he also lost. So what's wrong with queen takes a3? I'll just play it for the sake of it. That's what he played anyway. Yeah, so white will move in this position.
Does this like pushing the pawn or something?
So what move?
Like e7? I don't know.
E7. Okay, so if e7, what does black do?
Just block it.
Block it? Oh.
No. Not block. Like defend e8 so they can't.
So what move?
Maybe with the queen, like a4.
Like queen a4?
Oh wait, no, oh, yeah, because you're pinned with the.
Okay. And do you see anything? Do you see a continuation from white? It's okay to say no.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, okay. So if you play pawn e7, black either plays queen a4, right, which just stops, e8 queen, and another move for black, I believe, is just to play king to f7. So like here, I guess the white has like this, but so he gets his piece back, but actually, yeah, I mean, I don't think black even needs to bother with this, like e5 or e7, queen a4. And then you can't play e8. Okay. Well, okay. So e7 is not the move. You have to be a little more forcing.
I totally did not see that you have knight f5 ready as the next move in the actual system.
Knight f5?
Like, no, like, yeah. I mean, that's fine. I'm pretty sure
Well,
it said.
I figured that was going to happen, but knight f5, it's not actually knight f5.
Okay.
You need to, okay, well, I'm not like tricking you, okay, but it's not knight f5. Like you saw the right move, but it wasn't knight f5.
Right, the other one. So h5. Maybe.
Well, I figured, okay, well, most of you probably saw the move, right? Which is, in fact, knight h5. But now, why does knight h5 work? So what happens after knight h5?
Well, you either take with the pawn or you move the king. Probably take with the pawn.
Okay, so sure, knight h5. Yeah, if you move the king, well, seems a little silly. So like wherever you move, right? Maybe here, you want to avoid check. Well, then you just give up your knight, and not to mention your king is still in danger. Knight g8 checkmate, by the way, and you've still got to deal with this. So seems pretty bad for black. One might say that in this position, king h6, and one might say that white is slightly winning. Okay, so knight h5.
Slightly.
Yeah. So knight h5. There's only one move, which is
Knight takes.
pawn takes. Okay, so say pawn takes. Now what do you do with white?
Oh. You can move. Yeah, you can move queen g5 and then you take the knight.
Queen c5. Okay, so now what are black's options? So he's in check, right? Pawn here, queen here.
Yeah, just run. You have to move away, right?
So which square? So black has two choices, here or here.
Yeah.
So which one would he play?
Well, h8 looks pretty bad because you're in the corner, right?
Okay, well, joke's on you, it doesn't matter. Well, what does white play after? Either here or here.
Take.
So queen g,
Yeah,
take
take
queen
the
g5.
knight.
yeah, take the knight, and then what does black have to? So say he plays here.
Oh, it doesn't matter because they're both in check.
All right, let's play this actually. Here, you play king f8. Okay, what if he goes here? And then
Queen 6. Oh, 7. Oh, 7.
queen f7. Okay, he has to go here, and then
Oh, yeah. And then is it? Yeah. So queen d7.
oh yeah, queen d7. Check. So here, 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 here. Okay. So that said, he has to go here, and now really this is just finishing touches. So 7. Curious as to whether he could play queen f7 first. Not sure it matters. Well, let's see. e7, threatening e8, as well as queen f8. So check. So black just has to start checking, right? You can't. There's actually no way to stop queen f8 or e8 at the same time. So queen check, check, check. So white has to escape up to here. Check again. Takes. Okay, check here. More checks. He blocks, and all right. Now black's out of checks. And queen f8 is unstoppable. So black resigned. Okay. So overall, this game sort of illustrates how to form a plan based on the important squares in the position. So especially in white's case, right, he realized e4 was important, and he decided he would play f3 or 92 f3 rook e1, all that stuff, and play e4, and that ended up winning him the game. And keep in mind that this was like not many people had really played this opening before, so like this wasn't in a book or anything, right? This was out of Botvinnik's brain. Okay. And you also can't really blame Capablanca because he didn't know that either. He sort of underestimated the power of e4. He just assumed that if he gets his knight to b3, everything will be okay because he'll have this large advantage on the queen side. But it turns out that it didn't really matter because he was getting attacked after e4. White managed to activate all his pieces and aim them at black's king really quickly. And as we saw, the queen got misplaced on a4, right? So here, and now, right, white has a great attack and black really doesn't have a lot of time to respond, right? Because from here, right, knight f5 is coming, so you gotta play g6. Here, f5 is coming, you have to play f5. Takes. Taking here is coming, so you have to trade the rooks. Okay, well here I guess we can add that if takes here, you take back, you can't take the knight because of this. And if you take here, knight takes. He's actually black is actually okay here because as compared to what happened in the game, white doesn't have the pawn to support his attack. So instead, rook e6, threatening the knight. The knight actually doesn't have anywhere to go. So you can't go here because then rook takes e8, right? You block off the queen. You can't go here because, well, let's say you go here. Then white can just bring his queen over. And his queen is going to get in anyway. So if you take, check, and you still have the queen and pawn. Same problem as before. So black is sort of forced to take here. Take, again, threatening the knight. So king g7, forced, queen f4. Yeah, queen f4 was just to get the queen into the attack. Black takes a moment to try to defend, but it's already too late because at this point the bishop even comes in to help. Bishop a3, deflecting the queen, and we have knight h5, the coup de grace, finish him off. And yeah, the rest of this was just Botvinnik or Capablanca trying to check, but to no avail. So yeah, I guess the takeaway from this game really is, most importantly, you need to think about what squares are important in your position. What squares or what pieces, in this case squares, and you need to try to form a plan. But also you need to consider your opponent's plan, right? You need to consider whether their plan is worth ignoring, or you have to do something about it. Here we saw that Capablanca chose to ignore the knight b3 or the e4 thing. He just went on with his own knight b3, and that turned out to be a bad mistake. And also, thematically, this is just in general for the Nimzo, right? We see two plans for each side. For black, you have this c4 knight b3 plan. Not to say that it's bad, right? This is a plan. It's just that in this case, it didn't work out. And for white, we saw knight e2, f3, e4. So those are some things to take away for this opening in particular. Okay. Yeah. So I guess that sort of sums it up. I'll take any questions now.
I was curious, what if the queen didn't take the bishop near the end, right? Instead of deflecting itself.
Let's see. Okay, so I would imagine he plays something like this instead. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then you still have the you can still do the thing with the knight, right?
What, knight h5?
Yeah.
The difference is now he can block.
So would have this been better for black?
I wouldn't, not necessarily. I mean,
Better
I would say that,
than
okay, black is for sure still losing here. Because, I mean, if you intuitively, right, if you just count the pieces in the attack, right, you got the bishop in here, and this knight is essentially out of play. So, I mean, in this position, let's see, how can white win? So, I mean, there doesn't have to be a forced way, but for sure this is winning for white. So, maybe e7 or something. So e7 maybe. What else? I mean, knight h5 is still an idea, I guess. This doesn't work right now. So
but it's still pretty bad.
what? It's still pretty, yeah, for sure. This is definitely winning. I mean, I haven't really thought about this one, but intuitively, this is winning. So okay, maybe white can just play this, h4. I mean, the difference is okay, now white can take his time, right? Because what is black gonna do? He can't move his king. His queen is stuck here because you need to stop knight h5. This knight isn't gonna do anything. I mean, you can try to come back, I guess. Wait, let's say you play h4 with idea h5, h6. What can black do? Right. h5 himself. I mean, for the sake of time, let's just turn on stockfish. Okay, yeah, h4 is winning. But yeah, okay. h4 to queen c7. So let's just go with h4. h5. Queen c7 check. King g8. King h8 doesn't matter. Bishop e7. Okay, so you just bring the bishop in. And let's say he plays like knight g4. Oh. Alright, so you just force the trade of queens. If he moves away, right? Then that's fine. Then you move your bishop. And your queen has access to this whole side. Like, okay, let's here. That is h5, but let's just play here. I mean, this is obviously winning. e7, e6, or e7, e8 is unstoppable. Yeah, it's good. So Capablanca just took because he thought maybe by some chance, right, he can like get a perpetual. He just tries to check him forever, but didn't work out. Or maybe he just missed knight h5, although that's unlikely. When like a GM plays bishop a3, I mean, you know something's up. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
Who knows? It could have been a mouse slip.
Huh?
It could have been a mouse slip.
Bishop a3. Yeah. It definitely had mouse slips in 1930.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we can conclude this one. I think next week, since Daniel wasn't able to come this week, I think he'll be like lecturing next week. So yeah. All right, I'll stop the share.
Yeah, also, if you guys are interested in lectures, in the future, we may start doing meetings on Monday for lectures and more competitive stuff like that. So if you're interested, we'll post more information in the Discord server.